lady from the Old Testament, 1 Samuel chapter 25. I got an email a little while after I gave that lesson that compared Jesus to various nationalities, and at the end of that, it compared Jesus to women. Here's how Jesus is like women. He fed a lot with a little on a moment's notice. He also could not get his message through to a bunch of men, no matter how hard he tried. And the third is he still had to get up, even though he was dead, because there was still work to do. Men, is your wife beautiful? When I was 12 years old, I remember praying and asking God for, number one, a Christian wife. I wanted a Christian wife. I wanted a wife who would be my helper. And I wanted one that would be attractive. You know, you don't want to, and this goes for women too, you don't want to roll over every morning for the rest of your life and, you know, look at somebody you don't want to be looking at. So you want a wife, you want a husband that's attractive. Abigail is a woman who is described both as beautiful and as intelligent, prudent. And she saves David from making a horrible mistake. Now, man, how many times has your wife helped you keep you from making a horrible mistake? Sometimes it's on the other foot. Sometimes your wife really influences you to make a good decision, and it turns out to be a great decision. And you look back and say, well, I'm glad I listened to my wife. Abigail was that kind of person. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Now, from 1 Samuel chapter 18 all the way to the end of the book, 1 Samuel chapter 31, it's all about Saul trying to kill David. Saul is the king. Saul is jealous of David because David has killed Goliath and he's led some other excursions, military excursions. David is a great warrior. And the people praise David, and King Saul gets jealous. And so Saul wants to kill David. So the majority of the book of 1 Samuel is about Saul trying to kill David. And so chapter 25 is right in the middle of two occasions where David has the opportunity to kill King Saul. And so chapter 25 is in the middle of that. And chapter 24 is the first occasion where David has the opportunity to kill King Saul. And King Saul is acting irrational. David says, I am not trying to do anything to you, King Saul. I'm not trying to take your kingdom. Why are you trying to kill me? And so King Saul is acting irrationally. He's trying to kill David, and he's not successful. Chapter 24. Chapter 26, again, David has the opportunity to kill King Saul. King Saul is acting irrational, but David does not kill King Saul. King Saul is spared. Right in the middle, chapter 25. David wants to kill somebody, and now David is the one acting irrational. But David is hindered from carrying out this sinful decision. So, chapter 25 is interesting from a literary perspective because we have King Saul, his behavior being reflected in Nabal, Abigail's husband. We'll talk a little bit more about him in just a moment. But King Saul is also being reflected in the person of David because David now is the one who is pursuing someone and wants to kill him. And he too is now acting irrational. There's lots of contrast and parallels we see in this chapter with various other events in the life of David that we don't have time this morning to look at. But let's take a look at what is going on here. Look at verses 1 through 3. First of all, verse 1, Samuel died. Samuel is the prophet. Samuel is the one who's been guiding Israel spiritually speaking. And so he dies. David is running away from King Saul, and so he finds himself in the wilderness of Paran, verse 1. Verse 2, there was a man there in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was not just rich, literally great, or very rich, because he had 3,000 sheep and 5,000 goats, and it came about while he was shearing his sheep in Carmel, and the man's name is Nabal. And that's significant. We'll point that out in just a moment. His wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. And so David is there in the wilderness, and the sheep, the goats of Nabal are there in the wilderness with him. Now, Nabal, the Bible says, is harsh and evil in his dealings. Harsh is a word that originally referred to the weight of the yoke that pushed down on the oxen. That's what the word harsh literally meant originally. And then it came to be applied to the oxen themselves and them being stubborn and not wanting to do what the farmer wanted them to do. And then the word eventually developed to refer to someone who was hard to deal with. Someone who is recalcitrant. Someone who has just a hard and tough exterior. Obstinate. And so the Bible describes Nabal as this way. And because this is Christmas holidays, the person that comes to my mind, of course, is Ebenezer Scrooge. We saw the Christmas Carol. We watched the Christmas Carol Thursday night. Think about what kind of demeanor the man had at the beginning of the movie, and that's the way Nabal is described. Harsh and mean and badly behaved, the English Standard Version says. And you think, how on earth did he get tied up with Abigail? Well, of course, marriages at that time were arranged marriages, and he had the money, and he bought her. That's how it worked out, probably. And so Nabal is the man in the story, and the woman in the story, again, is Abigail. The Bible describes Abigail as being intelligent and beautiful in appearance. Now, the word intelligent also can be translated good understanding. It means prudent. It means cautious. It means keen. It means having common sense. She was a woman who had a good, sharp mind. She was a woman who was successful because she knew how to put into practice common sense. Now, it seems like sometimes the two don't always go together. Proverbs 11, verse 22 says, as a ring of gold in the swine's snout, so is a beautiful woman who lacks discretion. Proverbs 11 is talking about the adulterous woman. She uses her beauty in order to entice men who are already married to someone else. But Abigail was a woman who was beautiful and who was intelligent. And we see that intelligence out of her working in this event that we're looking at this morning, as well as the cruel nature of Nabal being worked out in this story as well. Now, the Bible mentions 12, I've counted 12 women who are beautiful. Beauty is a blessing from God. Most of the women who are mentioned as beautiful, in fact, are in David's life. We've got Sarah and Rebekah from the story of Genesis, but then also Bathsheba, Abigail, Tamar, Absalom's daughter, who's also named Tamar, and then the Shunammite woman who helped warm David's feet when he was old. You remember 1 Kings chapter 1. And then Job's 3 daughters and Solomon's wife. Solomon's wife is called beautiful 16 times in the Song of Solomon. We're going to have a lesson next year on the Song of Solomon. The beauty and the intelligence, especially of Abigail, is drawn in sharp contrast to David's decision with Bathsheba in 2 Samuel chapter 11. We'll talk about that at the end of our lesson this morning. So these are the 3 people in our story this morning. Nabal and Abigail and then David. Well, look at what David does. David is out there with his men. He's been running away from King Saul. He comes across the flock of Nabal. Nabal's a wealthy man. He's got all these sheep and all these goats. And he asks Nabal very kindly, in a very good way, in a very subservient way, in a very humble way, would you help give me some food for my men? Look at verse 6. Thus you shall say, he sent a messenger to Nabal, thus you shall say, have a long life. Peace be to you. Peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. 3 times the word peace is used there. But that's in contrast to the 3 times David used the word sword later on after Nabal turns him down. But he asks Nabal, just give me, look at verse 8, please give whatever you find at hand to feed my men. That's all I ask. A little bit of water, a little bit of bread. I'm not asking for much. Just give me something But Nabal is cruel. Nabal is obstinate. Nabal is harsh in his dealings. Look what Nabal says in verse 10. Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Notice verse 11. How arrogant and self-centered Nabal is. Count how many times he uses the word I. Or he uses the word my in verse 11. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered from my shears, and I give it to men whose origin I do not know? No, Nabal says, I am not giving you anything. David's young men retraced their way and went back, verse 12, and they come and told David according to all these words. And look at David. The contrast in the nature of David from when he defeated Goliath back in 1 Samuel chapter 17, and he says God is going to take vengeance on Goliath because he's the enemy of God and of his people, to now David says to his men, gird up your sword. And each man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And he took 400 men. And he was going to go and wipe out Nabal because he wouldn't give him any bread. How many times have you done something stupid on the spur of the moment? You let your emotions get the best of you and you do something dumb. There was a man and his wife who bought a new four-poster bed. And they were trying to get it into the bedroom, and they were having a hard time getting it twisted through the door to get it in the door. And the man got so mad he went downstairs and he got his hands on it. He came up and he sawed off all those posts off the bed so that he could get it in. And just as they were setting the bed in the place, the other one screwed off in his hand. How many times do we do things that are dumb because we let our emotions get the best of us? And that's the way David is. David says, I'm going to take 400 men and nothing is going to be left. I'm going to kill everybody in Nabal's family and all of his servants. Well, the message gets back to Abigail. Verse 14, the young men tell Abigail, Nabal's wife, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet the master, and he scorned them. Listen to how Nabal's men, what they think of David. That'll tell us something, won't it? See what they say of David. Look at verse 15. The men were very good to us, and we were not insulted, nor did we miss anything as long as we went out about with them while we were in the fields. So David's men were already spending time with Nabal's men, and they didn't take anything. You see, Nabal's not there. He's the businessman. He's back at home. The servants are out there taking care of the flocks and the herd, and they don't miss anything. And they say, David took good care of us. Verse 16, they were a wall to us both by night and by day all the time we were with them tending the sheep. And so not only did they not take anything, but they also served as a defense for Nabal's flocks and herds and his servants, protecting them from wild animals and perhaps even marauders. And so up to this point, David has acted entirely, we might say, in a Christian manner. He's done everything right. And we would say David deserves something. If you don't want to kill any of your flocks, give him some bread, give him some grapes or something. Because they're out there. And of course, David was being pursued unrighteously. He's had to leave his home, not for his own sin, but because of King Saul. So verse 17, the men tell Abigail, now therefore, know and consider what you should do, for evil is plotted against our master and against all his household, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. You know what a scoundrel your husband is. Do something, because we've upset David. Now Abigail's sharp. And we're going to see how Abigail is sharp and how she's keen. Now the first thing she does is she gets busy. 3 times in this text it is emphasized that Abigail works quickly. She doesn't let grass grow under her feet, in other words. And then she fixes all this food. Look at verse 18. Abigail hurries, and she takes 200